Hello, welcome to NeoScribe. Hal 9000 asks, why were the handful of Greeks so great, just a few guys inventing so many things? Well, historians have pondered the same question over the years, why certain cultures have been able to produce many geniuses and/or displayed profound creativity. These cultures are sometimes referred to as genius clusters and include Renaissance Florence, 18th century Edinburgh of the Scottish Enlightenment, and more recently, Silicon Valley. And of course, there's ancient Greece, more accurately, classical Athens, which was arguably the most magnificent genius cluster in history. While not all of the innovations associated with ancient Greece originated there, many were, and all influence Western culture today. All of the city-states in ancient Greece played its role, notably Sparta, that was instrumental for keeping Greece safe from the Persian Empire, but the majority of the credit for the cultural and scientific innovations go to Athens. Athens reached its apex as a civilization in the 5th and 4th centuries BC between around 480 and 323 BC, called the Classical Athens period. But this situation was far from spontaneous. Neolithic people inhabited the site of Athens as far back as before 3000 BC, and Athens was permanently settled around 1400 BC with the establishment of the Mycenaean civilization. So it's important to understand that the Athenian culture developed for 1000 years before it even reached the classical period and all of its brilliance. That said, it boggles my mind that such a rich and sophisticated culture could have existed so long ago. First off, the brilliance of the architecture and engineering goes without saying. Athens has so many magnificent ancient buildings that are still standing today, many built in the classical period, such as the Parthenon. There were obviously philosophy and science in classical Athens, which were one and the same back then. However, there were many great philosophers outside of the classical period, such as Thales and Pythagoras. But some historians believe that the classical period had the most significant philosophers, including the famous succession of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. At one point, the city had two academies, Plato's Academy and Aristotle's Lyceum. In addition to philosophy and science, Athens had a direct democracy system where citizens directly voted on laws. And the laws were sophisticated, as were the applications of the law, that often involved the use of contracts of many varieties. There were contracts for hiring labor and leasing property. Citizens even practiced the concept of earnest money when necessary. Some transactions required the buyer to provide earnest money, which the seller could keep as penalty if the buyer did not produce the full payment amount. And then the buyer could, in turn, sue the seller if the seller failed to produce the product. And of course, there was art, such as sculptures and decorated pottery, that serves as shining symbols of Athenian culture. Unfortunately, most of the statues did not survive over the years, but the ones that did illustrate how the Greeks mastered capturing the human form. There were also the performing arts. Athens would have large festivals called Dionysia in honor of the god of the grape harvest, Dionysus. And the festivals would involve competition between 3 tragic playwrights held at the Theater of Dionysus in front of crowds of up to 15,000 people. Indeed, classical Athenian culture seemed way ahead of its time, but what made the culture possible? Was it merely because Athens had been around for a long time and had time to develop? That is part of the answer, but there are indeed many more elements involved. For a civilization in antiquity to support accessory professions like philosophers and playwrights, it requires the division of labor and a specific social structure. In other words, Athens had enough wealthy citizens to finance art and scholars. There were around 250,000 people in classical Athens. At the top was the upper class, commonly referred to as the leisure class. Historians believe there were 30,000 people in this class. Individuals in this class performed little to no mundane tasks and devoted their time to civilized leisurely endeavors. And then of course there was the middle class and lower class, and finally a large population of slaves. Slaves mainly worked in agriculture, but pretty much anything the higher classes did not want to do, they had slaves do it for them. Even poor farmers had 1 or 2 slaves. Now this kind of social structure played an essential role in Athenian culture, but it was not unique by any means in ancient times. So what separated classical Athens from other civilizations in the past? The answer is its underlying culture, its ideologies, social norms, and values. First, the classical Athenian citizens, the upper class, despised work. They embraced leisure. But leisure had a little different meaning back then compared to today based on the philosophy of Aristotle. Leisure did not necessarily mean relaxing idly on the beach, but more often meant spending time doing intrinsically valuable activities. And Aristotle's definition of leisure also excluded any activities done for the pursuit of wealth or power. Surely artists were compensated for their work, but soon as the artist created or performed art for the purpose of making money, it was no longer viewed as leisurely. Athenian culture also valued participation in discussions concerning politics, philosophy, and public affairs. They in turn looked down on citizens who refused to participate in public affairs and referred to them as idiotes. So that's where we got the word idiot from. Anyway, another important aspect was the openness of Athenian culture. Not only was Athens a global city, but it also welcomed foreigners and allowed outsiders to roam around the city freely. However, it's important to note that foreigners were not able to become citizens, but it was the Athenians' openness that was key, because they were open to different ideas, open to learning from the experiences of foreigners, and they applied the good in what they learned. Now, if we take a step back, we can see a clear picture. Ancient Athenians were far from perfect, considering their way of life was made possible by slavery. It had a large leisure class, numbering in the tens of thousands, that valued spending time doing activities with intrinsic value, such as the pursuit of knowledge and art. Much of their time was spent exchanging ideas and debating, not only with each other, but foreigners too. So with all of these elements combined, Athens became a social soup of critical thinkers, of artists, and philosophers. Alright, thank you so much for watching. I had a blast making this video. I love learning new things. I almost had goosebumps when I read about Aristotle's philosophy on leisure. You see, this channel is a hobby of mine that takes up all of my free time and that I enjoy tremendously. But I realize when I focus too much on the channel growing and success, it starts to feel less like a hobby, less leisurely. So I hope Aristotle's philosophy sticks with me and that this channel always remains an activity of leisure. Anyway, I want to thank Hal9000 for suggesting this topic. This is the kind of video that I was hoping to make when I started this series. I am enjoying this series so much, but in order to keep it going, I need your help. Send me your ideas for topics that you want me to cover. I am looking for topics that I usually do not cover. The more random, the better. Okay, next week we will return to the HMS Endeavour for part 2 of Captain Cook's epic voyage to observe the transit of Venus. If you missed part 1, you should definitely check it out. You can find it easily on my video tab. Look for the thumbnail with a large ship. Alright, that's all I have for now. I hope you enjoyed your journey. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I am Neil Scribe, and I'll see you on the next journey.